Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing a Masechet Succah. We are on Daf Nun Gimel, Amud Bet. The first wide line in the Amud. This Amud is being learned as a Zechut Rufah Shel Mab for Rachel bat Edna, Rachel Simcha bat Nahid, Michael ben Nahid, Esther Bracha bat Chaya, Avraham ben Tashgol, and Shira bat Chemda, who have Rufah Shel Mab. This Amud is also being learned as Zechut for Aliyat Neshama of Jacqueline bat Avraham and Agdas. This week's learning of the community has been dedicated by Shea family, Cohen family, and Dayan family. This should be an ultimate zechut for all the mishpachot. Amen. So last piece of the Mishnah, the previous Mishnah that we touched on, was that when they opened the top door, Shar HaElyon, aka Shar HaNikanor, in order to go on their way to take the water, Sheivat Mayim Ushafte Mayim Besason, from the Mayan HaShiloach, they would go 10 steps down, and then they would stop. This was the process. They would blow the shofarot, they would go down and blow more. So the language of the Mishnah is a little bit ambiguous. It says, Ma'ala Asirit. So is it that they went 10 steps down from the 15 and now they're standing on the 5th one from the bottom? Or that they went down to Ma'ala Asirit, which means they went down 5 steps and they're standing on the 10th step when you count from bottom up. So that's, in Gemara, you find many places that Rabbi Yirmiyah asks questions that are very not clear in the language, and it's left with teku. So this is one of those. By Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yirmiyah asked, Le Ma'ala Asirit, when you say they reached Ma'ala Asirit, which one is it? The Nachit Chamisha v'Kaya Asara? Does it mean that they went 5 steps down and they're now standing? They reached Ma'ala Asirit, they reached the 10th step, which means from the bottom when you count, now they're 10 steps up. Or that they went down 10 steps and the step they're standing on is the 5th step from the bottom. Or is it, says the Gemara, the second one, the Nachit Chamisha v'Kaya Asara, or Dilma, the Nachit Asara v'Kaya Chamisha, and the Gemara says, Tishbi Yitares Kushot v'Ibayot. This is one of those things that you have to wait for Eliyahu Navi to come and clarify prior to the coming of Mashiach. So that's left as a question. The Gemara Tanu Rabbanan Mimash Mashenemar Ufnehem Kedma. Again, the Mishnah mentioned that as they are going down from Shar Nikanor, they do the process of going down, stopping, blowing shofar, then they go through the entire Ezrat Nashim, and they open Shar HaMizrach, which is the entrance way to the courtyard, the initial courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash, called Ezrat Nashim, and through that they go down from Chel, they go to Har HaBayit, down to Mayan HaShiloach, where they drew the water for Simchat Beit HaShoeva. So that eastern gate of the Beit HaMikdash is where they turned around before actually exiting the Beit HaMikdash, and they would bow towards Ma'arav, towards Kodesh HaKodashim, and they would say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our forefathers, Avotenu, who were in this place, in Bayit Rishon, what they would do is, they would be Achoreim Le'echad, Peneim El HaMizrach, they would bow to the sun, which comes from this, in front of this gate, Shar HaMizrach, facing east, and their back was to the Hechal. The back was towards Kodesh HaKodashim, but us, Leka'inenu, our eyes are to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Despite our Avotenu, our forefathers, messing up in this area, we are doing it right. Right? That's what the Mishnah says. Now, the Gemara picks on something very pashut, very simple. When you are facing the Mizrach, where is your back to? The Ma'arav. Like last we checked, that's how it works. So why do you have to say, Penehem was the Mizrach, v'achorehem le Ma'arav? Of course, achorehem le Ma'arav. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chana bar Acha. See, the Gemara says that over here. Sorry, the. Tan Rabbanan, mimashma shnemar upnem kedma. When the Gemara says, the Mishnah says the face was in Bayit Rishon that were of the Avodah Zarah, that the face was to the sun, to east. Any yodea shachorehem and Hechal Hashem. Don't I know that the back is to Ma'arav, to Hechal Hashem? Why do you have to say it again? Elamat Talmud lomar achorehem and Hechal Hashem. Why do you have to repeat that the back was to the Hechal? So it says. The Gemara melamed shayu por'in atzman umatrizin kelape mata. It's not just that their back was to the Echal. When the Mishnah says their back was to the Echal, and the Pasuk mentions that, is coming to teach you that they would actually expose themselves and defecate towards the Echal. This was, again, the Avodah is not just as a disgraceful act, but they were also of the Baal. One of the avodot of Baal, right? One of the Avodah Zarah of Baal, as we learn in Masechet Avodah Zarah, the way they actually served it was they would defecate. That's the Rav Chaim Shmuel actually has a very interesting and powerful essay called Baal Peor, in which he discusses all of the distasteful ways of service of Baal Peor. The Gemara says there was this woman that was sick and she was dying. And she made a neder. She said, if I get better, I will go around and will serve every single Avodah Zarah that exists. So she got better. And okay, now she made a neder. She goes around, right? And starts doing all the Avodah Zarah until she gets to Baal Peor. So, okay, what do we do here? He said, yeah, the way you do it is you have to expose yourself and defecate. She's like, this is so degrading that I rather go back to my sickness and die and not do this. So Gemara says. On the other hand, the Gemara says that there was this fellow that went in front of Baal Peor and he did the avodah of defecation in front of the Avodah Zarah and went and chutz min hakavod wiped himself with the nose of the Avodah Zarah. And all the kumarim, all the priests of the Avodah Zarah, they were there. They were chazaku baruch. There has never been in history anyone that has served this Avodah Zarah as good as you did. So it says, what is exactly the pshat over here? It says the greatest human mentality and desire is to break boundaries. You want to have no boundaries. Absolute hefkerut. There's no kabbalah. I am the center of universe. That's the most appealing ta'ava that the person has. It's the core of human race. So therefore, he says, Baal Peor was the most powerful Avodah Zarah that even the greatest of the kings could not get rid of. They couldn't. Right? The Bamot they couldn't get rid of. Baal Peor they couldn't get rid of. So what is the desire? What is the draw to this Avodah Zarah? Especially even considering that the Avodah was so disgraceful that you had to do this. So it says of Chaim is because the core element of human race is we want to have no strings attached. I am the center of universe. Things revolve around me. I don't have to answer to anybody. That's very appealing. And that was the appeal of Avodah Zarah of Baal. That you show that there's no kavod. I don't even have kavod for the Avodah Zarah itself. You see, usually, even if you don't have kavod for anything else, you have the kavod for the cult leader, for the Avodah Zarah, for at least the deity itself. No, here, I'm such central thing that I don't have to even have respect for it. And therefore, if you could even disgrace it more and go wipe yourself with his nose, that's mamash mitzvah mina muvchar, ma'adrin mina ma'adrin, that's what they would do, right? And that's the power of the Avodah Zarah. So perhaps here is not just that they would defecate in Ezrat Nashim, but they would use Ezrat Nashim in order to show the Avodah Zarah, the Avodah to the Avodah Zarah of Baal. So therefore, when it says Achorehem elechal Hashem, it's not just coming to tell you that when a person's physical face is towards east, the back happens to be to the west, but rather they actually did something which involved their Achorehem elechal Hashem shayu porin umatrizin kelape mata. So says the Gemara, Anu leka ulekainenu. Now the Mishnah ended up saying, but us, we say lekainenu, our eyes are enenu lecha teluyot, our eyes are to Hashem. And then the Gemara said, the Mishnah said, the second opinion is that they would say, Anu leka ulekainenu. Our eyes is to Hashem and to Hashem, which sounds pretty bad, because the Gemara says in Masechet Brachot that we learned together in Daf Lamed Gimal, the Gemara there says that if a person says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and then he says again Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that's the Tosafot. It's literally Machloket. Rabbi Chananel maybe says differently. If you say Shema Shema, right, Hashem Hashem Elokeinu Elokeinu, right, word, not pasuk, but the Ikar Halacha, as it's brought in Shulchan Aruch in Orachaim Siman Samech Aleph, is if a person says the pasuk, you can't even say the pasuk twice, right? This happens sometimes in Brit Milah when the Aviyah Ben has to read the psukim, and there's Ana Hashem Moshiach and Ana Hashem Tzechara. Those you say two, and he does the Shema also, so you have to stop him in the middle. The Gemara says if a person says Modim in Lachash, Mishtatkin oto. We thank you, Hashem. We thank you, Hashem. Right? So, how many Hashems do you have? It sounds like you are serving two different deities, two different sources of power, and therefore, you quiet them. And saying Shema, Shema is like Modim. Anything that is direct, again, Machloket, other psukim of Shema, but certainly Shema itself, it sounds like, Hashem is being modeh, you're admitting your subservience to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. You say twice, it sounds like you're referring to two different sources of power, Chas v'Shalom. Therefore, we stop him. That's the Gemara in Masechet Brachot. So says the Gemara here, when you say Anu leka uleka enenu, our eyes is to Hashem and to Hashem. That's really sounding bad, right? How many Hashems do you have? So says the Gemara, any person that says Shema twice is like saying Modim twice. You quiet him down, you stop him. This is how they would say it. Our forefathers would bow down to the sun towards the east. But us, Lekah, we belong to Hashem. We belong to you, Hashem. We're dedicated to you. And not only that, ve'enenu lekah me'achlot. And our eyes only look forward to your chesed. We're only waiting for your compassion. So that means the two different things. We are dedicated to Hashem, and we only hope for Hashem's compassion, Hashem's salvation. So it's two different things that we're saying. Therefore, it's not like modim. It's not that you're repeating the same thing. You're saying two different things. Fine. Says the next Mishnah. Now, the next Mishnah needs a little preface, a little hakdama. As we spoke about the shofar that they would blow in the process of nisuch hamayim, going to draw the water and coming back and actually pouring the nisuch hamayim, the chasosrot that would be blown in the process. The Gemara now deviates on a tangent and discusses the chatzosrot that will be blown every single day of the year, meaning this is a tangent. Now we're going off Masechet Succah, the topic of Sukkah, and we're going to discuss the detail of the trumpets, the chatzosrot, that were blown every day in the process of the service of the Beit HaMikdash. That's what we're going to be discussing. Now, What is this? This is really in Parashat Baha'alotcha. Selecha shte chasosrot kesef, miksha ta'aseh otam. Hashem says you have to have 2 chasosrot shel kesef. These are made out of pure silver. Minimum is 2, right? And miksha ta'aseh otam, they're one of the only things, maybe the only other thing aside from kaporet and the menorah, that they have to be miksha. They have to be made out of a solid piece of silver. They cannot be pieced together afterwards. They cannot be screwed together, welded together. It has to be made out of a solid piece of silver. I once said, all the things that have to be solid, they indicate a certain consistency that's needed in that process. And you only find it in the Klei HaMikdash by menorah and by kaporet, which are the elements of Torah, because the Torah has to be consistent. Can't be you piece it together. It has to be one solid, consistent piece. That the dedication that you have has to be through and through. Has to be zahav tahor. Those are also two only elements in the Mishkan, that they have to be pure gold. They're not gold plated, unlike the Shulchan and the Mizbeach that are all gold plated. This is through and through, right? It has to be tocho keboro. It has to be completely, inside out, full of Torah. It also has to be consistent. It has to be one piece. And your whole day is defined by your dedication to the Torah. Even when you go to work, you're going to work in order to be able to learn and do, right? All the activities that a person does is consistent with learning Torah and doing a life of Avodat Hashem. That's why it has to be. So this, Chasosrot, how does that fit? There has to be also Miksha. So perhaps this is because the Mikra, Edaul Masad, Machanot, the Pasuk says. You use it for the service of the Beit HaMikdash, of course, as we're going to see just in a moment, and for calling the community in order to either go to war, the Mikra, when you have to unify the community to do anything, either to get up and travel in the Mishkan, in the time of the Mishkan when they were in the Midbar, or the Mikraida, you have to gather them for any communal purpose. You have to unify them. That's why it has to be one piece, one solid piece. It's the ultimate unity of Am Yisrael, which is represented by a miksha, by a solid piece of silver that this was made out of. But here we're going to be discussing what they used it for during the day-to-day service of the Mikdash. Now, we learned in the Mishnah, in Erchin, Daf Yud, it was brought 2 pages ago in Masechet Succah as well, that the shofar that they blew, or the musical instrument that they blew in, they played in the Mikdash, was not so clear if it was even Leviim, right? Some say it was the Avdei Kohanim, some say it was Leviim. So it's 3 different shitot of what exactly it was. Now, the trumpets that were blown every day in the Mikdash were only through the Kohanim, not even Leviim. It's only the Kohanim who blew the trumpets, the Chasosrot, in the Mikdash. The minimum is shte Chasosrot. You have to have at least 2 trumpets. The maximum is, again, this is a Gemara in Erchin. The maximum was how many? 120. So minimum of 2, maximum of 120, and the minimum that you would blow is 24, as we'll see in the Mishnah, and the maximum would be 48. How the breakdown of that is will be the topic of our Mishnah. One more thing, that when they would do the Chasosrot, you could also have shofar with it. The Chasosrot were called through Ariu Lifnei Hashem, the Pasuk says. So not a mandatory, but an optional thing would be to accompany the blowing of the Chasosrot with the blowing of shofarot, and that could be even done by regular Israelim, by regular Jews. That does not have to be done by Kohanim, but the actual Chasosrot, which is the must, is part of the avodah of the Beit HaMikdash, and it's not done by Levim as you would expect it to be. It's not part of the shir that should be done by the Levim. It is done only and only by Kohanim. So that brings us really to our Mishnah of En Pochatin Me 21 Tkiyot B'Mikdash. They would not do less than 21. Now, was it 24? We'll get to that momentarily. We will not do less than 21 blowing of Chasosrot in the Mikdash, ve'en mosifin 48. And they would not do more than 48. Bechol Yom, on daily basis, the 21 comes from Hayusham Esrim ve'achat Tkiyot B'Mikdash. On a regular day, you would have 21 Tkiyot in the Mikdash. And this does not mean that was a Tkiyah necessarily, right? The Tru'ah also, which is not called Pashut, not a straight voice, would also be considered a blow. So here when we say Tkiyot, means blows, right? They had 21 blows in the Mikdash, Shalosh Liftichat Sha'arim. In the beginning of the day, they would have Tkiyah Tru'ah Tkiyah, and this was to basically call out the Levi'im and Kohanim, indicating that the Avodah of the Mikdash has started. Yalla, you get out, you get to work. So that's the three initial ones early in the morning that they did, even before they brought Tamid Shel Shachar. Just to announce that the day has started for Kohanim and Levi'im to get to work. V'tesha leTamid Shel Shachar, and there would be 9 for Tamid Shel Shachar, 3 sets of 3 each. V'tesha leTamid Shel Ben HaArbaim, and there would be another 9 for Tamid Shel Ben HaArbaim. So that gives you 9 plus 9 plus 3, 21 blows on a regular day in the Mikdash. Ube Musafin, the days that you had Korban Musaf as well, so you had another 9 added to the 21, so that would add up to 30 blows on a day that you had Musaf. Hayu Mosifin od Tesha, ube Erev Shabbat. On Erev Shabbat you would have another 6 Tkiyot that were there. Now, what is this 6? Says the Gemara, Shalosh lehavtil et ha'am mimelacha, ve'shalosh lehavdil ben kodesh lechol. 3 to stop people from work, and 3 to announce the coming of Shabbat actually. Now, the initial 3 were not just blown together at the same time, but Shata Mincha, they would blow 1 Tkiyah, and this way, people who were in the fields, in the outskirts of the town, they would know that it has time to stop, drop, and roll. You know, whatever you have been doing, you stop it and you start coming back to town. So that takes obviously a longer period. You have to stop what you're doing, lock up basically, and start walking towards your house. It takes a little longer. That's the initial Tkiyah. Then they would have a Tru'ah. And Tru'ah, you can remember, this is Tkiyah, Tru'ah, Tkiyah, right? So we call them Tkiyot, blows, but it's Tkiyah, Tru'ah, Tkiyah. So the second one would be a Tru'ah for people who are Ba'alei Chanuyot, the storekeepers that are in town, they're next to their house, is easier. So you lock up, now you go home. So that's the time for them. And the third one would be enough time for people to say, okay, fine, now time has come to take your hot pots from the stove, from the kira, and go and do hatmana for tomorrow morning. You got to go cover and insulate the pots, the food that you're going to be using for Shabbat morning to keep it hot and nice, right? So that would be the final thing that they did before Shabbat actually came in. Then you had enough time for people who are just coming from the field and they have not done preparations for Shabbat to do a little cooking of a duck katan and a little fish, a little something for Shabbat to have chamin. And then as Shabbat would come in, they would have Tkiyah Tru'ah Tkiyah, that's the last 3 of the 6, to tell people that Shabbat, has arrived, and then there would be shovet from all melacha. So that's the 6 that they would do on an Erev Shabbat. Shalosh is for lehavdil et ha'am melacha, to stop people from melacha. Again, that's 3 different times, minutes away from each other. V'shalosh lehavdil ben kodesh lechol. The last 3 were back to back without any hefsek in order to announce the coming of Shabbat. So therefore, on a regular Erev Shabbat, you had 6 extra ones. And how many you had when you had Korban Musaf? You had 30. So therefore, says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, on Erev Shabbat, Shebetoch HaChag, in Erev Shabbat that was also in Chag HaSukkot, Hayusham 48, ends up being 48 Tkiot subtotal. Shalosh leptichat she'arim. The first 3 stays the same as for Ptichat Sha'arim that they would have every morning to announce to the Kohanim and Leviim that the Avodah has started, that they should get to work. Shalosh l'sha'ar ha'elyon. Then, in the process of going to draw water from Mea Shiloach, would be 3 on the Sha'ar ha'elyon, which is called Sha'ar Nikanor, as we learned before in the previous Mishnah. Ve'shalosh l'sha'ar ha'tachton. Then it would go through the Sha'ar ha'tachton and blow another set of 3. Shalosh lemilui hamayim. Another 3 when they are drawing the water, filling up in the gold vessels for nisuch hamayim. Ve'shalosh al gabe mizbeach. And another 3 for pouring it on top of the mizbeach. Tesha letamid shel shachar. That's the process of nisuch hamayim. But then you're going to have 9 for tamid shel shachar, another 9 letamid shel harbaim, and another 9 for musafin, and shalosh laftil et ha'am min ha'melacha. 3 would be to stop people from work. Ve'shalosh lehavdil ben kodesh lechol. The last 3 would be to stop people from any melacha when they announce the coming of the Shabbat, and all together would be 48 tkiot. So says, now the Gemara, matnitin delok Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Why is matnitin not like Rabbi Yehuda? The Tanya, we learned in Braita, Rabbi Yehuda omer, hapochet lo yifchot misheva, vehamosif lo yosif al 16. Minimum of 7, maximum of 16. So that doesn't seem to fit in first glance with the numbers we had of 21 and 48. So says the Gemara, b'may kamifligi, what is the machloket over here? So Rabbi Yehuda savar, tki'at teru'at tki'ah, achati. Rabbi Yehuda holds, again, they're counting the same thing. If you divide 21 and 48 to 3, you'll end up with 7 and 16. So one of them is counting the sets of Tkiat Tkiah being as 1. So, Hapochet lo yifchot misheva, meaning from 7 sets of blowing, shofar, or chasosrot here. And we'll see if you're it's not going to be more than 16 sets, which is, again, 16 times 3 would be your 48. So what's the machlok? Why? It's a semantics? What's exactly the difference over here? Why do you have to say it as 7 and 16 versus 21 and 48? So says the Gemara, Lemay nafkamina. That's what the Gemara is asking. What is exactly the nafkamina over here? But my kapligi, Rabbi Yehuda savar tki'at ru'at tki'ah achati. All 3 of them is one set. V'Rabbanan savri tki'ah lechud v'teru'ah lechud. Tki'ah and teru'ah are not the same. They are separate. Each one is a kol bifnei atzmo, and therefore they have to be counted as 21 and 48 kolot. Says the Gemara, my Tamad Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda? Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, Utkaltem teruah. That you see that when you are blowing, it's utkaltem teruah, that they're all the same piece, the same group. So therefore, the tkiyah also is called, the teruah is called tkiyah as well. So therefore, when you count them, you can't count them separately. It has to be counted as sets of 3. And says the Gemara, "V'Rabbanan hahu lepshuta lefanea uleacharea hu da'ata." Chachamim say no. The reason that says utkatem teruah is because the pasuk is coming to teach you that there's never a teruah without a tkiyah before and a tkiyah after, right? Actually, the Torah Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tav Kuf Sadi, when discussing the halachot of shofar and Rosh Hashanah, the Torah explains this. Really, Gemara, Mishnah and Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Daf Lamed Dalet, the Gemara there discusses, well, the whole sugya of Mishnah into the Gemara there, but the Gemara discusses that we learn the tkiyot of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur from each other. There's twice that's mentioned by Rosh Hashanah, once by Yom Kippur, and they are equated together. So 3 times it says teruah, right? Yom teruah yirachem, and so on. And we learn from the pasuk that every teruah has to have a pshuta lefaneha or pshuta la'achareha. Has to have a tkiyah pshuta, one simple, solid voice before and one after. So that's how we know that on Rosh Hashanah we need 9 blows of shofar. Right? The reason that we do so many is because of the machloket, like the Gemara says there, Rabbi Abahu, that we don't know what is considered teruah. So that's why we do 3 different attempts. So you end up with 30 voices of shofar that are heard, because we don't know if teruah is what we call shvarim, right? 2, 2, 2, or is it what we call teruah, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, or is it maybe both of them, because genuchi ganach v'yeluli yalil, that a person that cries, again, this is simulating the cry of a person. Yevava is v'teyavev em Sisra. We learned it from the mother of Sisra that cried as recognizing that her son is never going to come back and is dead. So you start crying. Teyavev is Yevava. Yevava is cry. What is cry? Is it shvarim, which is like long voices of cry in the beginning of a cry, right? It's more sighs of, right? That's what you do like that. Or is it when it becomes very intensified and a person is uncontrollably crying, which will become teruah? So maybe it's shvarim, maybe it's both shvarim teruah. So we do tkiyah, shvarim, tkiyah 3 times. We do tkiyah, teruah, tkiyah 3 times, and we do tkiyah shvarim teruah tkiyah 3 times, which altogether would be 30 kolot, right? Now the reason that we do that 3 times is a different story by itself, but nevertheless, this is what Chachamim learn, that when it says utkatem teruah, it's not coming to tell you that the teruah and tkiyah are the same thing. No, it's coming to tell you that every teruah has to be sandwiched with a tkiyah beforehand and a tkiyah afterwards. That is what he's coming to teach you. V'Rabbanan my tamahu. We're out of time. What is the reason of Rabbanan? Dichtiv ubehakil et hakal. When you gather the keilah, titkeu velo tariu. You only blow tkiyah and not teruah. So you see the pasuk surgically separates them from each other. You have tkiyah without teruah. So you see that they're very separate. They're not the same. They don't have to be bundled together. And therefore, we count them separately as they stand. So 21 and 48, not 7 and 16, which Bezat Hashem will come back to and we'll discuss further in the days to come.